Little Dai suddenly walked over from the side, took her little pigtail, and tied it directly to your wrist. Even tying a knot that was impossible to untie, you were dumbfounded, turning your head to look at this young lady who wanted to kidnap you to be her kept man. And asked, "What are you doing?" Little Dai said triumphantly. "You yourself are your weapon." Then she waited with a face full of expectation for your reaction. Unfortunately, neither of them understood what the other was saying. You stared earnestly at Little Dai, and after seeing that group of demons and monsters, now comparing Little Dai with them, it seemed that this young lady wasn't bad either, according to your standards. You could give Little Dai at least a 70, of course. She's barefaced now, unlike those beauties from your previous life who couldn't even unlock their phones after taking off their makeup. After all, this is a primitive society. No need to demand so much. However, while accepting her, there was one thing you couldn't agree to. You shook your head and gestured to her, telling her that you wouldn't go back to her tribe with her. Unless she joined your tribe, then you would agree. Little Dai understood what you meant, and immediately nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Then she went back to the Bian tribe to report the situation to her mother, also taking with her a pottery jar of white salt that you gave her. In the second half of the night, the various tribes also rested in their respective camps. After everyone arrived here, they started various trades, and by this time they were all exhausted. Only some young men and women with energy to burn hid in the flower bushes and rolled around on the grass. The next morning, after you had breakfast, you also took Little Dai to stroll around the other people's stalls. You had been selling things since you first arrived, and hadn't had a chance to see what special products the others had. The snake tribe's stalls were full of snake skins and several kinds of herbs. According to the snake witch, there was a medicine specifically for treating external injuries, stopping bleeding and reducing inflammation. It was a plant root that looked like ginger, and it had already been dried. It needed to be crushed or ground into powder for external application. As soon as you heard this, you knew it was a good thing, a pure natural hemostatic medicine for external wounds. So you directly bought it all up. You also picked out a beautiful golden python skin, and finally exchanged it for 3 pottery pots. On the egg tribe stalls, there were some wooden forks and animal tendons. You weren't interested in the wooden forks, but the animal tendons were excellent materials for making composite bows. You directly used the pottery pots and for large bowls to exchange for all of them. On the R tribe stall, there was a small turtle shell, which looked very exquisite. You bought it with a large pottery bowl. Then it was the other stalls in Rumming Water Valley. You waved around pottery and white salt, buying and buying like crazy. Some were very important, such as medicines, and some were dispensable, such as animal skins and food. Little Dai held your hand and followed beside you. The two of you spent money like water, almost using up all the pottery pots you brought. Of course, you also achieved your purpose. The tribal leaders watched you buying their things with a lot of pottery, and they were secretly delighted. Most of their tribes had exchanged people for white salt, but they also liked pottery very much, but they really couldn't spare any more people to exchange. Seeing that the Han tribe had so much pottery, many people secretly coveted it. Now that you personally delivered the pottery to their door, although not much, but each tribe got some, the jealousy of the tribes just now was greatly reduced, and their goodwill towards you, this capable young leader, greatly increased. At this point, the purpose of the spring gathering was also completed, and some tribes began to leave one after another. It was also time for the Han tribe to go back. You asked people to organize the team and prepared to go home. The Snake tribe and the Bian tribe were going the same way as you, so they would follow along on the way back. 558 young men and women were temporarily organized into 20 square formations, led by a young man from the Han tribe, One Ear and Feather, riding on horned deer, led the way in front, and Stump drove the ox cart in the middle of the team. The Snake Witch and Chang sat together on the ox cart, and the Bian tribe and the Snake tribe also followed in the middle of the team. You and Dolly rode deer behind the team, bringing up the rear. Little Dai saw that you didn't take her with you, and stood directly in front of your horned deer, pulling on the reins. Seeing this, you bent down and reached out to Little Dai. "What are you doing standing there? Come on up and go home with me." Hearing this, Little Dai happily grabbed your hand, and you pulled her up in front of you. The two of you rode a deer at the very back. A spring breeze carrying the scent of flowers brushed past, and Little Dai's loose long hair hit your face, and then looking at the bare back revealed behind the bodice, made you, a virgin who had lived 2 lifetimes, feel a little restless. To distract yourself, you began to teach Little Dai to speak Mandarin, reciting the names of everything you saw along the way in Mandarin, and then letting Little Dai repeat them when it was time to camp at night. Dolly and the others brought over a pig's leg. Little Dai plucked some grass to feed the deer. you had already lit a bonfire. Seeing Dolly and the others, you asked, "How is it? What's going on with those people I told you to keep an eye on?" Beastfang truthfully reported what he had observed. "Leader, among the 30 people from the fire tribe, 6 are leaving markings along the way. This was already within your expectations. That fire leader was indeed not a good person. Just their tribe, taking out all the boys to exchange, and still wanting to play dirty tricks behind their backs. But you naturally wouldn't allow it, since he wanted to play. Then you would teach him how to behave." Dolly hurriedly asked, "Leader, what should we do now? Destroy all those markings and kill all those fire tribe boys?" You smiled evilly and said, "Why kill them? Why not take advantage of the free labor that was sent to our doorstep? Since they don't want to live a good life with us, then they can all dig rivers and move bricks for me." Stone asked again, "Then we just leave the markings there? What if the fire tribe chases after us?" You explained calmly, "The fact that they left markings means that they won't attack immediately. They're just using them to guide the people behind them. They definitely want to go back to the tribe to gather manpower, and then follow the markings to chase after us. According to their plan, they will definitely be able to give us a fatal blow by coordinating from the inside and outside. Now we don't care about those markings, just let them leave them there, but we can't go directly back to the tribe. We need to take a detour to the Orphan's Peak." Dolly was a little puzzled. "Why take a detour?" You didn't answer him, but turned to instruct Beastfang to pass your order to One Ear. As for Dolly, he was responsible for watching the 30 boys from the fire tribe. When they arrived at the Orphan's Peak, they would be separated into a separate team. Stone, on the other hand, would travel with everyone for 2 more days. After 2 days, he would ride a deer directly back to the tribe to call for support, and let Rat Great lead the hunting team to set up camp in advance at the Orphan's Peak to wait for you. After arriving at the Orphan's Peak, directly control those 30 people from the fire tribe. Set up an ambush around them. Wait for the fire tribe to deliver themselves to our door, and then we will wipe them out in one fell swoop." Dolly was still a little confused. "Leader, how do you know the fire tribe will go to the Orphan's Peak? What if they attack our tribe directly?" Beastfang had already understood your plan, turned his head and explained to Dolly, "Are you stupid? Isn't someone leaving markings for them all the time? If we take the person leaving the markings to the Orphan's Peak, then the people chasing the markings will definitely follow to the Orphan's Peak." Dolly finally understood. "So that's how it is. Your method is too amazing." You continued to instruct a few people to be careful and not to talk nonsense. Tell the squad leaders that they shouldn't sleep too deeply at night, and each squad should arrange for people to take turns keeping watch. Everyone answered in unison, "We understand." After saying that, you moved a stone, sat down by the bonfire, and continued to grill meat with Little Dai. The next morning, the Han tribe's team continued to set off, and walked peacefully for 2 days. The Snake tribe's team was about to part ways with the Han tribe. The snake which led his tribesmen to say goodbye to you. "Han leader, I'm leaving. I hope we can meet again in the future." You still couldn't understand what he was saying, but you roughly knew what he meant. You quickly held your chest and bowed slightly to the snake which, after the snake tribe left, Stone rode a deer to your side. You told him to go back to the tribe first, and tell Uncle about it when he got there. Let him first organize the tribesmen to build thatched houses for the newcomers to live in, and then, together with Rat Great, take the hunting team to the Orphan's Peak to set up camp. Be sure to bring more feather arrows, and also bring a few jars of grease." After receiving the order, Stone immediately set off on his deer. At the same time, the fire tribe also returned to their residence, and were currently preparing manpower to attack the Han tribe. The fire tribe was a large tribe with a total population of nearly 200, but their population structure was very distorted. There were only about 300 adult males, about 500 adult females, only 100 or 200 larger children, and more than 700 children under the age of 5, and not a single girl. The cause of this extreme phenomenon was the current fire leader, who was only 19 years old this year. 6 years ago, the fire tribe had less than 300 people. At that time, Lee wasn't the leader yet. This guy had liked playing with fire since he was a child, and his chest had been burned by flames, leaving a huge, hideous scar. That was the summer when Lee was 7 years old. That day, his parents were not at home, and he was playing with fire in the thatched hut. This child was very fascinated by the flames, especially liked watching the golden flames, listening to the crackling sound of the firewood burning in the flames. He felt this was a kind of enjoyment. As a result, this unlucky child was enjoying himself when sparks flying out of the flames ignited the entire house. The dry thatched hut burned very quickly, and the fire raged fiercely. Lee was as if possessed, staring at the flames, as if he saw gods in the flames, the witch left behind in the tribe so that there was a fire over there, and hurriedly ran over. regardless of the raging fire. He grabbed the dazed Lee out. A large piece of the child's chest was burned, but he stubbornly didn't cry out in pain, and was still staring blankly. Just as everyone pulled Lee out of the burning house, before they had time to scold him, they heard a loud cry from the thatched hut. That was Lee's sister, who was less than 3 years old. The witch wanted to go in and rescue the little girl. But a thatched hut built of wood and thatch couldn't withstand the scorching of the flames. Before the witch had time to lift his leg, he heard a rumbling sound, and the thatched hut collapsed. When Lee's parents returned in the evening, they saw that the thatched hut they lived in every day had turned into a pile of ashes. And their daughter, who was less than 3 years old, had also turned into a black mass of coke. Lee's mother held the black mass of coke and cried her heart out. His father took a rattan and beat Lee half to death. From then on, Lee was bullied by his companions every day, scolding him for burning his sister to death. His parents also treated him coldly, giving him very little food. But Lee still didn't change his nature, and was still so fascinated by flames. Every time after being beaten by his companions, he would secretly run far away and continue to burn, as if only flames could warm his heart. Lacking food and clothing, Lee began to hunt to support himself. But he was young. Later, by chance, he caught a large rat with long brown hair. The rat was slow to react, had almost no vision, was fat, and ran slowly. Lee tied up the rat and threw it directly into the flames. Burning it alive, the rat struggled frantically in the flames, making a shrill scream. Lee sat beside him, enjoying watching, waiting for the rat to burn to death. But he waited for a long time, and the rat was still burning. Later, after Lee's many cruel experiments, he finally discovered the reason. The long hair on the rat's body was very resistant to burning, and one rat could burn for a long time. So Lee named this rat the fire rat. The discovery of the fire rat made Lee even more crazy. He even built a pool himself with stones, and raised fire rats in it, just to burn 2 of them every day, so that he could fill his stomach and enjoy himself at the same time. In this way, after Lee grew up, he directly killed the previous leader and sat on the leader's seat. People who didn't obey him were all burned to death one by one, because he had suffered bullying and cold looks since he was a child. His temper became very violent, and his personality was very cruel. He began to lead the tribe to attack other tribes, killing all the men who resisted, taking the women back to use as birthing machines. The next time he went to attack other tribes, Lee would let those captured men charge in the front. If they were unwilling, he would use their women as threats, or burn their older children alive as a warning. The captives gradually collapsed, and were forced to join the attacking team, after they conquered one tribe after another. After being baptized by blood, and seeing so many spoils of war, the captives' hearts gradually became crazy and twisted, and they were willing to join Lee's command, and those who were always stubborn were burned to death alive by him. In this way, the fire tribe expanded rapidly under Lee's leadership, and the number of people increased. The captured women once reached more than 1,000. All of whom were imprisoned in a dark and damp cave in the fire tribe's residence. The captured women were forced to give birth to children. If they gave birth to a boy, they could be released from the cave. If they gave birth to a girl, they would directly kill the baby girl, because the girls born in their tribe couldn't give birth to children for their tribe, and it was a waste of food to raise them. Some women were still young when they were captured, and died directly because they couldn't withstand their cruel torture. Others died because of the harsh conditions that they had to give birth under, leading to a mother and child dying during pregnancy. There were also women who had become numb, and kept giving birth to children for the fire tribe, and eventually died of weakness and illness due to continuous childbirth. In addition, there was no medical technology in this era, and people often died of massive bleeding due to difficult childbirth. Therefore, the mortality rate of captured women was extremely high. From more than 1.00 at the most, there are now only about 500 left. Even among these 500, a large part of them are currently pregnant. The women can't get a moment to rest and recuperate, and will eventually die from various reasons due to excessive childbirth. There were also women who had given birth to a child for the fire tribe and wanted to escape, but the consequences of being caught back were very tragic. They would burn the escaped women alive in public, scared the other women, and no longer dared to have the idea of escaping, and could only numbly become slaves to give birth to children for the fire tribe. It is precisely because of this that the fire tribe has such a distorted population structure. The 700 or so boys under the age of 5 were all born in the last few years. This does not include the hundreds of baby girls who were killed just after birth. As soon as the spring gathering ended, Lee led 10 warriors back to the fire tribe. He wanted to gather more warriors and prepare more supplies to attack the Han tribe. This spring gathering let Lee gain some knowledge. He and you are both frantically plundering people. You use white salt and pottery to make others willingly join the Han tribe, but he uses bloody and cruel killings, forcing those captives to be his warriors, and forcing those women to give birth to children for them. The comparison between these two methods was like opening a new door for Lee. Realizing that there was another way to plunder people in the Fire tribe, someone questioned Lee. After all, they were about to attack the Han tribe, and the Han tribe had a large population. Could they really win? Lee replied nonchalantly. Although the Han tribe has a large number of people, most of those they brought back were women and children. And these people have no combat power at all. Besides, the leader of the Han tribe is just a kid. He planned to send 200 or so people to set fire to the Han tribe first. When the fire started, they would take advantage of the chaos to rush in and kill, and grab the women, stone parts, white salt, and horned beasts of the Han tribe. At this time, someone worried that the Han tribe's residence was large, and the fire might not be able to start. He said that he had already made arrangements, and had sent 30 people ahead of time. As long as he gave a signal, those people would set fires everywhere in the tribe. When the time came, the Han tribe would naturally fall into chaos, and could only be slaughtered by them. They also triumphantly talked about the transaction with the Han tribe woman at the spring gathering, ridiculing the other party's reaction at the time, as if in his eyes the other party was a fool. Seeing this, the subordinates flattered Lee one after another. Lee then told them to prepare things quickly, especially to bring more fire rat skins. Because this thing was the most useful for arson, Lee did not forget to promise his subordinates that the women plundered this time were very young, and let them have a good time after they were plundered. Next, the people of the Fire tribe were busy preparing war materials. They made a weapon similar to a stone axe, which was to tie a stone to one end of a wooden stick, and then wrap a layer of long-haired fire rat skin around it. When fighting, just ignite it and throw it at the enemy, so that it can not only injure the enemy, but also set fire incidentally. Just then, 2 men were carrying a woman's corpse to the mass grave. When passing by the residence, those women with big bellies just numbly looked at the corpse, with no expression on their faces, like soulless wood. But those men who were making weapons were talking and laughing, not caring at all. But when the 2 men threw the corpse into the mass grave, an accident suddenly happened. A black shadow suddenly jumped out of the grass on the ground. One of the men was stunned, and then he heard a rush of wind behind his head. The 2 hurriedly turned their heads to check the situation. However, as soon as one of them turned his head, he only heard a buzzing sound in his ear, and then saw a thick stick the size of an arm hitting his head straight. His skull instantly exploded, and the red and white splashed all around. The remaining person was so frightened that he turned around and ran, shouting for help while running. But before he could run 2 steps, there was another buzzing sound behind his ear, and the next moment the person also fell to the ground directly. The black shadow retracted a 2-meter-long straight wooden stick and thrust it into the grass with a puff, calmly cut off the heads of the 2 men, used his big stick to pick up the 2 heads and carried them behind him. He bent down and carried the woman's corpse on the ground on his shoulder, and then strode towards the depths of the jungle. In the residential area of the Lee tribe, several men were gathering together to make headdresses. One of them suddenly asked, "Did you hear anything just now?" Another person said a little uncertainly, "It seems like I heard it. It seems like someone was shouting to kill someone." Then someone else discovered that the 2 who threw the corpses hadn't come back yet. The few people were all stunned, and then looked at each other, and went to see together. When a few men cautiously walked to the mass grave, all they saw were 2 headless corpses. The corpse of the woman, who had just been thrown here, had also disappeared without a trace. Everyone was taken aback, and quickly went back to tell the leader. When a few people carried the 2 headless corpses in front of Lee, he angrily smashed the pottery bowl in his hand and said with gritted teeth, "Damn, it's that person again. When I catch him, I will definitely cut off the flesh from his body and eat it in front of him." On the 4th day after the spring gathering ended, Chang, the leader of the Bian tribe, came to say goodbye to you and the Han tribe, because the Bian tribe's residence was nearby, and they could no longer walk with the Han tribe's team. You led corner and stood aside, quietly watching Little Dai and Chang hugging each other and saying goodbye. Finally, Chang bowed to you again and left with the Bian tribe. Little Dai stood beside you, holding your hand, watching the departing back of the Bian tribe, silently shedding tears. You gently squeezed Little Dai's hand and said to her, "When you miss them, I can take you back to the Bian tribe to see them." Hearing this, Little Dai excitedly hugged your neck and kissed you on the face. "You're so good to me." After that, the team continued to set off and kept walking until evening, when the team finally arrived at the foot of the slope of the Orphan's Peak. At this time, Dolly and Red Great also rode horned deer and came to your side. You nodded to the 2 of them and said, "Start from the back." The 2 nodded, turned around and left. Little Di sat in front of you. Seeing this scene, feeling inexplicable, she couldn't help but ask, "Who is that person wearing the silver tin crown? What are they going to do?" You didn't answer, but took Little Di riding a deer, came to the side of the Thunder Beast's grave, and then stopped there and didn't move. Little Di looked back suspiciously, and then he saw a scene that surprised him. Rat Great and Dolly, and the people from the hunting team, walked past the square formations one by one. They called out the Fire Tribe boys from the team, took away their spears, and asked them to help carry the logs that were sawed off by the roadside. The other boys and girls in the team were secretly rejoicing that they were not left behind to work. But they never thought about what those dozens of people would face next. A few boys in a group, carrying the logs, walked to a place where the team could not see. Then they saw nearly 100 adult men and women, holding spears, bows and arrows, and ropes, waiting there, looking at them coldly. The Fire Tribe boys carrying the logs immediately felt that something was wrong, and dropped the logs and wanted to run. As a result, they were surrounded by the hunting team who had been prepared for a long time, and were beaten with the wooden shafts of the spears. The Fire Tribe boys also wanted to resist, but their weapons had been taken away, and they had walked a distance carrying heavy logs. And now they couldn't even breathe evenly. So how much combat power could they have? So after being beaten with sticks, they were all pressed to the ground and tied up. In the chaos, a very strong Fire Tribe boy almost ran out. However, he was knocked down by Rat Great's punch to the face, and 3 teeth flew out. He was pressed to the ground with blood all over his mouth, and was beaten and kicked again, and then tied up. Little Di covered her mouth and watched this scene in surprise. After a while, she turned her head to look at you in disbelief and asked, "Why are you arresting them?" You didn't speak, but pulled the reins, urged the horned deer to turn around, and walked back a distance along the place where the team had just passed, pointing out some places for Little Di to see. Some markings had been made on the trees or by the roadside, or in the grass. These things all had one thing in common, that is, they all pointed in the direction of the Han tribe's advance. Little Di opened her mouth wide in surprise. She also saw the role of these things, which was to mark the route. You explained to Little Di, "They want to lead their tribe to kill our people and steal our women, pottery, and white salt." Little Di was obviously frightened by your words. She had never experienced such a thing, and had never even heard of it. There would actually be other tribes coming to kill people and steal things, and even steal her. Little Di said to you, a little scared, "Then what should we do? Why don't we go to the Bean tribe? Mother will definitely have a way." You shook your head and told her, "No need, you go back to the tribe. I will kill them here." Little Di immediately shook her head firmly and said, "I won't go. Wherever you are, I will be there. I want to be with you." Little Di's words made you feel a little moved. Although she was not as beautiful as the women you had seen in your previous life, this loyalty was even more precious.